Hello, my name is Faisal Islam, and we have many documentaries and videos over here. And today we came here with an interesting religion of Hinduism, and we're going to talk about Hinduism with Chandra Swami, and he will talk us more about Hinduism. But over here in Manhattan, New York City, we are going to show you how the Hindus do the activities, and we're going to talk to a few Hindus about their experience. Now, a very nutshell of Hinduism from myself is that it's a religion start from Manu Smriti, and it goes on slow by slow to Kali Yuga, and it recycles over and over. And we're going to talk to different people and take interviews. And here's one picture you can see over there of Bhagwan Krishna having his flute. And anybody will go upstairs and keep on talking more about it. So let's go upstairs. Okay, what's your experience of Hinduism? Sounds good. What's your experience of Hinduism?
So this is the when Hinduism, this is Krishna consciousness was brought by Srila Prabhupada as spiritual master in 1965. And it's more like it's just bhakti yoga. Like if you go to India and you say Hinduism, it's different because Hindus they have different sects, and this is Bhakti Yoga and is Sanatana Dharma.
How you came to know about this concept?
How I came to know?
Yeah.
I'm from Argentina.
Yes.
And I met the devotees in Buenos Aires in 1974. And that's it. And I became, I joined the movement.
What's your experience about it?
Well, I was seeking the truth, right? So I would say this is, if you're asking about Hinduism, this is the essence of which Hinduism, which became more geographical. But this truth was really known all over the world in ancient times, that there are several major religions that are monotheistic and understand that God is everywhere, is omnipotent, omniscient. Krishna consciousness is a path whereby we're supposed to focus our consciousness on the Godhead and understand that material matter is not the source of reality, but spirit is the source of reality.
Thank you for that.
Okay,
Thank you
you're welcome.
Alright. So we are going to talk to these 3 ladies over there about the belief system about Hinduism and the Iskon Church. So you can start with your experience about the Iskon Church.
Great.
Okay.
Very much It's really great. I feel very much at home here.
At home, okay. And you belong to India? Also you born?
My parents.
Okay. And were you a convert? Or you was born to? Are you convert to Hinduism or Iskon Church?
I was born into a family that is part of the Iskon community.
Okay.
But I definitely had the opportunity growing up to make my own decisions, and I feel very comfortable with Iskon, and I feel very happy here as my own on my own accord. I've decided to become.
As you're a convert, so I will ask you more questions.
Oh, I'm not really a convert.
I mean, sorry. Caucasian who is Hindu. So,
yeah.
how's the experience when you go to? How's the experience to go to the street as somebody they're Hindu? How's the experience about that?
People give me weird looks a lot. More in the I tend to get asked more questions by New York. I mean, this is New York. Some people are really accepting here.
Have you been to India?
Many times.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Myself went to India 11 times.
Oh, I've been 15 times.
Oh, so you're 4 times more than me. And what's your experience about, so you was born in India?
I was born in India.
Okay,
Yeah.
and you're actually family from India?
My family are from India, but I was born here.
You was born here too, okay.
Pretty much same
And you want to join us in the video? So you are convert to this one church? You were born there? Okay. And how's your experience so far? Great. You've been to India? Tell us something more about Iskon Church, the essence of the belief of the Iskon Church.
Basically, we're all tapping into the same water that's under, like Muslim or Christian or Hindu. Everyone thinks, oh, like my well is the best, but it's actually underneath. It's all the same water flowing underneath the ground. So it's not really a difference of what religion it is.
So the understanding of myself, how Hinduism is very accepting. Very tolerant. Okay, thank you very much. So, what do you say about Iskon Church? Who will speak what language?
Oh, Hindi.
Hindi? Iskon Church के बारे में क्या बोलते हैं?
कॉन्सर्ट्स के बारे में हम लोग अच्छा बोलते हैं. राधा रानी का बर्थडे टुडे.
अच्छा.
एंड सब लोग आए हैं. सब नाइस सेलिब्रेट. नाइस प्रसादम.
So he's basically saying that he's coming over here and celebrating this occasion. Hinduism और Iskon में difference क्या है?
कुछ नहीं.
कुछ नहीं है. एक ही. अच्छा.
ये वैष्णव संप्रदाय.
अच्छा.
हिंदू जो है वो हर मतलब देवी देवताओं को मानता है.
अच्छा.
हमारा वैष्णव संप्रदाय जो है सनातन धर्म कृष्ण को मानता है.
अच्छा. He's saying that Vishnu, the sect of Vishnuism believe in Krishna, and Iskon believe in different demigods and stuffs.
No, we don't believe in demigods. We don't believe in demigods.
So you can explain better.
It's not because of explaining better. The thing is just, see, the Vaishnavism is to worship Lord Vishnu. And worship of the other god and goddesses is not permissible. It's not a question of permissible. They are permissible to the extent of the material benefits point of view. The spiritual point of benefits is only from Lord Vishnu or Lord Krishna himself. They can materially advance and then go back to Godhead, or like getting off the birth and death life cycle.
Recycle, yeah. Thank you. In Chinese, huh? There's some books over here you can see. This is in Bengali. This is in Hindi. This is probably in Tamil. This is in Chinese. Different languages let's talk about. This is probably in either Urdu or Arabic. This is in Bengali again. And it's all different languages we have over here. You was converted to Iskon Church, or you were born into Iskon Church? Converted, and were you speaking the religion? Also agnostic or atheistic? What do you find so beautiful about Iskon Church that you went to Iskon Church? So beautiful about it? Yeah, I mean, what do you find attracted or?
I think it's very progressive, very open. It doesn't give like judgmental about where which country you're coming from. Doesn't give you like it doesn't constrain you. It's just always open to everybody. So I like it. It's like give you freedom. Anybody can join.
So no racism.
Yeah, that's kind of things. I don't like that from my even before I joined. I didn't like.
Alright, so 490 people over here, sitting over here. So we'll ask them about their Iskon Church and their belief in essence and their personal experience. So what's your personal experience about Iskon Church?
My personal experience, I was born in an Iskon Church. And so an Iskon Church has been kind of like my home, my playground, my school. It's it's been where everything is. I spent the first 12 years of my life in a monastery inside Iskon church. So it's I really feel like almost all the blessings and good things I have in my life have come from things I've learned and experiences that I've had in this church.
So what's your experience of Iskon church? Were you converted or you was born into it?
No, I just like to come to the kirtan.
Sorry?
I come to the kirtan.
Okay. So, have you been to India?
Yes,
Yeah? And how was the experience?
I love it there.
Yeah? I personally been to India 11 times, so too. Traveling to India for 10 months of it. So, you say, what's your personal believing in? I didn't understand.
Oh, I said I come to the kirtan.
Caretaker?
Kirtan, the chanting.
Oh, chanting. Oh, that's nice. So I
And now I have friends here. I love my friends.
Also, you have a different belief system?
I don't really believe anything. I just love Krishna and the stories.
Okay. And what's the occasion today? Can you describe what the occasion going on today? There's an occasion today about Radha holiday or birthday, something like that today?
Yeah. I don't know, Paul, what is it, the day she appeared? It's like her birthday.
A birthday. Okay, that's nice. And how long is the, how many years of it?
I have no idea. Thousands of years?
Thousands of years.
How old is she?
Radha was the wife of Krishna, isn't it?
No, she was not. She was the wife of somebody else.
Somebody else.
Radha is Krishna's girlfriend.
So how was your experience about saying, okay, and you also came here for chatting. And how many times you been to India? Once, I like it. Where have you been to India? Oh, Vrindavan. Oh, we say Vrindavan in Vrindavan. It's in Varanasi, right? In Bihar. Vrindavan is where again? Uttar Pradesh, yeah. So that's Haryana Pradesh probably, somewhere there. Around Haryana, somewhere there. Vrindavan.
India is complicated.
You want to go to Varanasi sometimes? The most sacred river over there.
I've been.
You've been to Varanasi. Do you take the holy bath?
Didn't go with the
Oh, you
It
have
was very cold when I was there.
Okay, it's the winter time probably.
It was.
Oh, thank you. Good evening. My name is Faisal from New York, and I have Mr. respected Swami Chandra Shekhara, and he will talk about the Iskon church and the differences between Hinduism and so on and so on. So Swamiji, first question would be, what is the main difference between Hinduism and Iskon church? Because Mr. Madhush Das was telling me it's different.
Well, in one sense, Hinduism is a large umbrella. There are many things under it, just like we could say Christianity has many denominations, and in some ways those denominations are very different than one another. And when we're talking about Hinduism, probably the subcategories of Hinduism are very different than one another. There's four basic main branches of Hinduism. One of them is the Vaishnava tradition. That's what we are. That's probably the largest. Then there is the Shaivite tradition, which worships Lord Shiva as the supreme. And there's Shakta worship, which is worship of Shiva's wife, Durga Devi, as a supreme. And finally, the fourth thing we have is something called Advaita Vedanta, which sees that there are no differentiations, that the supreme is formless. So these are four of the main sub-branches of Hinduism, and you can see that they're not the same. They're very different than one another in the basic belief, in what we're trying to do, and how we're trying to do it. And so Vaishnavism is actually, besides these four, there's other, all kinds of other little permutations, but just to make it simple, Vaishnavism comes from the word Vishnu. Vishnu is the name for God. And we worship Vishnu. We also recognize Shiva, we recognize Durga Devi, but we don't worship them. They're demigods, and we don't worship the demigods, we worship the Supreme Lord, the one Lord that's over all the various demigods, and that's why we're called Vaishnavas. And so in that sense, religion could be seen like a target. Like, if you're an archer and there's a target in front of you, there's one circle, littler circle, littler circle, little circle, and finally the very center. So some people, when they're shooting at religion, they're happy just somewhere on the target. They don't really care so much whether they hit the center of the target. If they hit the target at all, they're happy. So generally to many people, religion is a kind of learning how not to break really gross moral codes, and an idea that we should help others. Of course, that's the general target of religion. Now, you can get a little closer in, and when you get hungry for a little more detail about religion, you may begin to realize that besides that, there is a deeper core of religion, and that is that religion is talking about trying not only just to be good, but to help others and to have a positive effect on the world. So that's a little closer in. Now, we may actually understand that religion is even deeper than that. That religion comes to the stage where we begin to think that religion is about actually understanding and doing what God wants, and that God is a person. Finally we get a little closer and we learn that God is a person. And then we learn that not only is God a person...
You mean human?
Well, the Bible says that man is made in the image of God. So that God is not figuratively some amorphous thing. He has that, what we call the Brahman feature, where he is spread everywhere, but that's not the important feature of him. The important feature of him is a personal feature, and that feature of God has a form. We have a form because God has a form.
Right. Okay.
So our form comes from him, and of course his form is very different than our present form, which is based in matter. And so we learn then to develop a sense of service to God. And then even deeper in the circle of religion, we learn that God wants intimate relationships with people, not just to serve him in a distant manner, but that we want to serve God in a personal way. And so that's even deeper in. So at any rate, these are various stages of recognizing God. And so we see that these other branches of Hinduism, they more or less have some similar things, but they have a lot of differences. Like we said, that the Shaivite tradition, instead of worshiping Vishnu or Krishna, they worship Shiva. And the Shakta tradition worships Durga Devi. And the impersonal, or the Advaita Vedanta system sees no person, but they simply see God as the all-pervading essence, and they consider ourselves to be one with God. And so we don't ascribe to any of those things. We're actually trying to learn how to serve God as a person, and we're trying to develop an ability to serve God not just sometimes, but all the time, and to learn how to serve God without expecting anything back from God. And this is a definition of bhakti, and that's what the process of Krishna consciousness is all about. And so we get around to A.C. Bhaktivedanta, who is our founder, and he came from India in the year 1965. He had studied the Vaishnava tradition for a long time. He was initiated, and he wanted to transplant this process of spiritual life of Krishna consciousness in the Western world. And so the first task he had was to set about to translate books. So he translated something called the Bhagavad Gita, which is a very famous book. It's a short, relatively speaking, short book. It has 700 verses. And he explained what those verses meant. That's what the purports are. If you see one of the Bhagavad Gita's by A.C. Bhaktivedanta. And then he started to translate something called the Srimad Bhagavatam. And in the Srimad Bhagavatam, we have the full explanation of bhakti, or devotion, how we get it, how we gradually cultivate it in a world that is mostly full of distractions. This material world is designed for us to either follow, on one side, our material plans and our material desires, or we can at some point decide that that's a useless thing to do, and we can do the other thing, which is we can cultivate a deep love for God. And those two things are in opposite directions. And most of us don't choose one or the other, we choose back and forth between one and the other. And the idea of bhakti is learning how to gradually come to the point where we're choosing the process of serving and loving God almost all the time, and we're not doing the other thing anymore. So this is the process of bhakti. It will not happen accidentally. It will not happen automatically. It's a conscious choice. And there is a strategy to it, that if we don't take any kind of strategy, likely we will be outflanked by the material energy and its glitter and glamour. We will maybe say some nice words about God, but in essence our life will be 95% about following our material proclivities and so on and so forth. Now, in the process of spiritual development or spiritual life, we talk about the idea of reincarnation, that what we do today, it feeds back into the things we experience tomorrow, and as a cumulative effect, the things we do over our lifetime shape our next life until we are fully focused on serving God. And then we don't come back in another body at all. Rather, we go back to the spiritual world. There's another world besides this one. We call that the spiritual world. And there, God is existing eternally, and we can exist with God there and serve Him in that world. That's the spiritual
So the
world.
question about is a very important part. You say that Hinduism always believe in reincarnation of 7 births or so on. That's why they have the 7 circumambulation during the marriage. Is it different from Hinduism, where they believe that if you have bad karma, next life you come out with something bad? Is it same, or you say like they go to directly heaven?
Well, okay, let me describe that.
Differentiate the different
Right.
consciousness.
Well, in Hinduism, you will find, if you ask 10 Hindus any philosophical question, you will get 10 different answers. Now, if you ask a Vaishnava 10 different questions, you should get pretty much the same answers to those questions. So that's what I'm trying to get across, that Hinduism says a lot of different things depending on which kind of Hinduism somebody is following. And they may not be even following any one of those 4 things I've talked about. They may be kind of Hinduism at large. So what a Hindu might say, I can't say, because it could be any number of things. But in general, Hinduism accepts the idea of reincarnation. Now, in the Vaishnava tradition, we accept it, but we have some more details there, that we take birth not once or twice or 7, but zillions of times, until we come to the point where we're done with this material world. We no longer are attracted by anything here, and we understand there's a conscious decision made. We understand there's a choice to give up following our dreams in the material world. We want to go to the spiritual world. And to do that means we have to really work on ourselves to change our habits. And so by degrees it may take one lifetime, or it may take more than that, but at any rate, once we make that commitment, then we are actually gradually becoming removed from this material world. And although we live in it, we work in it, we take it seriously, we are no longer seeing it as the end of our lives or the goal of our lives. Our goal is somewhere else. Our goal is the spiritual world. We want to re-enter that world.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yep. There is a lady from England, her name is Brendan Williams. Her question is, I think you already answered it. Her question is, Hare Krishna movement was very popularized in the 70s. But what happened to it? I mean, she don't see them much in England.
Right. Well, we have places all over the world. We're not as populous, maybe, as some other religions. And at one time, this is a thing that a lot of people may not have realized, that when our founder, A.C. Bhaktivedanta, came to the Western world, particularly he started in New York City here, he was working with people, his followers, who were largely, I would say, between the ages of maybe at the lowest 14 and at the highest probably 26 or 27. We were dealing with a lot of basically unmarried young people. And so during that time, it was customary that practically everybody lived in the temple. And so there was literally an army of people to go out and be on the streets and do so many different things. Over time, naturally, as that age bracket progressed upwards as time has it. They became not 14 to 26, but they became like 26 to 30, or maybe even 30 to 40, you know. And as those changes happen, people get married, they settle down. And our tradition has nothing against marriage, and there's nothing wrong with that. But when someone gets married, then their life changes, and at that point they take on added responsibilities. They usually have some kind of occupation, and because they have an occupation, now it doesn't make sense for them to live in the temple and devote their whole time to the temple. They have to also manage their own household. So after the 70s came the 80s, when many people were older and married and they moved out of the temple. And still there was a large amount of people living in the temple, but over time the population changed from being largely temple congregation to being largely living outside congregation. And so temples became smaller. And although our numbers have increased, maybe we're not as visible as we once were.
Like in the 70s.
Right,
yeah,
right,
okay.
right.
Then this brother asked from Chennai, his name is Niaz, that you already answered, but still,
okay.
What is the belief of Hinduism exactly? 330 million gods, or 3 gods, or 1 god, or Charvakas, no god?
Yeah. So it depends on which kind of Hindu you ask. Right. So if you ask a Vaishnava, he'll say there's one God, and that's Vishnu. If you ask a Shaivite, he'll say there's one God, and that's Shiva. And if you ask a Durga worshipper or a Shaivite, they'll say there's one God, and that's Durga Devi. And if you ask an Advaita Vedanta, they'll say that there is one God, and He's formless, and everything, and we are all it. You know? So we say that there are many demigods. There are 33 million of them, to be giving a numerical idea to it. But they are not the Supreme. They are servants of the Supreme. They are little tiny living entities like you and me. However, they have been given enormous power in the world that we live in to actually be the managers of the material creation. That's what makes them separate or different than us. They are not as powerless as we are. In fact, they are given charge of the energies that shape the material world. So there's Brahma, he's a creator demigod. There's Shiva, he's a destructive demigod who everything has to come to an end. There's, Ganesh, who grants favors to people, helps them in overcoming obstacles. There is, Sarasvati, she gives knowledge. All these demigods have purposes, but they are never on the same level as the Supreme. They are always subordinate, and they are not in the same category of power that the Supreme has. All their powers derive from the Supreme.
Okay. Next is a lady from Colorado, and she want to ask you. I mean, she have the question already to me, but she's very excited to talk to you. And I mean, she never met. Actually, the reason is she never met a Swami, never.
Right. But we're a dangerous sort.
I mean, she saw you guys in the Indian movies, and
Right. Yeah. So you can definitely get a lot of really fine misconceptions.
Yeah. So she will ask the question directly over here. No network over here? No network? Oh. Okay. No network over here.
Oh, I see. But usually people can get network down here.
Oh, okay.
You're finding your networks down?
No network, right? Okay, her question was basically the most common question of the Westerners, basically the caste system.
The caste system, right. So that's a very good question. I'm glad these kind of questions are coming up, because these are largely misunderstood ideas. The Varnashram Dharma, as it's actually called, Varna and Ashram, and Dharma means religion, or more than religion, it means the duties or the things that are one is unable to give up. So Varnas are occupations, and ashramas are statuses of life. So there's 4 Varnas and there's 4 ashrams. The 4 Varnas are Brahminical Varna, which is the intellectuals, the priests, those people who guide society with spiritual knowledge. Kshatriyas are the managers, the kings, the rulers, the organizers, and the police and military and people like that. The Vaishyas are the agriculturalists, those who grow food and supply people with their necessities for clothing, shelter, and so forth. And finally, the Shudras are the fourth class, which are people who actually just fill in any of the blanks of what else needs to be done. So those are the four Varnas. And those Varnas are not established by one's birth, which is a common misconception. And in fact, this misconception has been so thoroughly ingrained in India that even many of the acharyas or leaders or prominent devotees in our line have spoken against this misconception. It's not.
Ambedkar could be one of them.
What's that?
Ambedkar?
I don't know who that is.
He's the first to find the Constitution of India.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, anyway. These four things, they certainly exist. We have a class of teachers, we have a class of warriors and administrators, we have a class of agriculturalists and business people, and we have a class of people who fill up everything else. There's no doubt that they exist. But in Bhagavad Gita, there's a verse that says that Chatra Varnyam Mayam Shrishta Guna Karma Vibhagasha. Krishna is saying that in Bhagavad Gita. He's saying these four orders come from me. But he says Guna Karma Vibhagasha. They're based on one's gunas or quality, not on janma. The word janma does not appear in that verse. And so a person's occupation is not governed by their birth, but rather is governed by their qualities. And so in the Vedic literatures, there's plenty of examples of people who were born in one particular varna, and although their parents were a particular varna, they chose a different occupation. And so this doesn't whitewash or carte blanche someone to being a brahmana simply because their parents are, nor does it preclude someone from taking a role as a teacher if their parents happen to come from another caste. Of course, this has been so rigidly institutionalized in India that this idea of varnas based on birth has become so rigid that it is a travesty on the original system. The original system was actually supposed to be based, as I said, on qualities and not on birth. Now, besides these four, there are four ashramas, which are a different thing. And in the beginning, someone is a student or studying, and that ashram is called the brahmacharya or brahmachari ashram, where a person studies the Vedas and becomes knowledgeable in spiritual topics. And then one moves usually into the second ashram, which is called grihastha, married ashram. There a person takes a husband or a wife, and they live together and they bring up a family. Then there's the third ashram, which is called vanaprastha ashram, where someone leaves family life and then begins to travel with the wife and visit holy places. This is after both the husband and wife are much older, the children are gone, they're married, they're established in their own occupations. Now the husband and wife detach from the situation and they go to spiritual locations, and there they contemplate the fact that soon they'll be leaving their bodies, and now the workaday world is behind them, their occupation is behind them. Now they have the time, instead of retiring by wasting time, they retire and focus almost exclusively on spiritual life. And finally there's the fourth ashram, which is the sannyas ashram, where the husband and wife even separate, and the husband wanders on his own and is supported just by whatever people give the husband. And in this way, then he learns to focus entirely on the Supreme Lord before he leaves. There's no absolute mandatory idea that one has to take sannyas from the vanaprastha ashram. The vanaprastha ashram is enough in itself. But it is important that the couple, when they get older, they move out of the grihastha ashram into the vanaprastha ashram, because then that means that they recognize their own impending death and they don't spend the last days of their life just involved in family affairs, which is generally what people do. So that's the caste system. But actually it's a system of employment or occupation and a system of spiritual progress simultaneously. And unfortunately it's been misrepresented, misunderstood in India for years. And what we really see now is a false notion of it. But the real notion of it does come directly from Krishna. So you're back online here.
Okay. Just give me one more try, if not then. Okay. So 2 more questions and then we wrap up. Okay. This guy from Luzon, from Bangladesh, asked that Hinduism, it have evolved time by time, or Buddhism, Jainism. How the Hindus of modern day view Buddhism, Jainism, and other religions came out?
That's an interesting question. Krishna spoke Bhagavad Gita approximately 5,000 years ago. So that was, let's say, roughly 3,000 BC. When Krishna left the planet, something we call the age of Kali Yuga happened. There are 4 ages, just like we have 4 seasons. We have spring, summer, fall, and then winter. We're in fall now, and soon it'll be winter, and then later on there'll be another spring. And so similarly, there are 4 ages: Satya, Traitya, Dwapara, and Kali. And after Kali, another Satya. It's a recurring cyclic thing. We have a recurring periodic 4 seasons. So Kali Yuga is known by the quality of rejection of religion. So the golden age is called Satya Yuga, where most people are very spiritual and there's no need for a very complicated mode of living.
Is it also known as Ramraj?
No, different thing altogether. But Satya Yuga was a long time ago, and people could just meditate during that time. Then Traitya came, and the quality of religion diminished in Traitya Yuga by 1/4. And then in Dwapara Yuga, the Yuga where Krishna was here, again the age decreased in its spiritual potency. And so that means that more and more people were not interested in spiritual goals. More and more people were interested in material goals, and people acted in more sinful and more selfish ways. And then Kali Yuga is kind of the bottom of the heap, where religion is 3/4 gone, and people have very little knowledge or interest in religion. And in general, we see that people are very materialistic and very focused on selfish goals. And so this is not an accident. It's planned this way. Religion decreases. And then, of course, after Kali Yuga is open, it jumps back up again to Satya Yuga, and it goes over and over again. And we may wonder why there's this kind of zigzag pattern. And the answer is, of course, that this material world is a world, actually, both the material and spiritual world have a property we call free will. So if there was no free will, we would all be robots. We would have only one possibility, and that possibility would be to serve and love God. And then would it really be service or love? Because there's no option, there's no possibility. So God gives us our own minute free will, and we can choose to serve or not serve. So if we choose not to serve, we come here. And so there has to be a place where people can choose not to serve. And the material world is that place. And then, of course, there's a certain percentage of people who will choose not to serve. And Kali Yuga is kind of the heyday for those people. There has to be a time and place for it. So there is. Now, to get onto the question you originally gave me, was the idea that in Kali Yuga, when religion decreases, the Vedas become more and more misrepresented by the people who are supposed to be properly misrepresenting them. And the people who are representing the Vedas first represent that the real goal of the Vedas is to live happy in this world and possibly to go to the heavenly planets, which is different from the abode of God. But you can possibly go there. And eventually they start to actually misrepresent the Vedas in a very serious way by performing animal sacrifices. And so because all these animals are being killed and then people are eating the animals, then the Supreme Lord sees this misrepresentation of the Vedas and creates a system to bring that back into focus again. And so the first thing he does is send Buddha. And the first thing that Buddha teaches is forget the Vedas. So Buddha teaches a philosophy which is almost identical to the Vedas, but he says forget the Vedas. And in teaching this philosophy, he specifically highlights a principle, and that principle is ahimsa. And that means that people should not be killing animals. So the first thing he does is do away with this mass animal slaughter. And that's Buddha's coming to this material world. He does that. And he puts the Vedas out of the picture. And of course, some people say he's as early as 800 BC. Some say he's around 300 BC or somewhere in that range. And eventually, Emperor Ashoka takes on Buddhism, and he makes it the state religion of India. And India largely embraces a Buddhist outlook, which means Buddhism is probably 80% like the Vedas, but it just doesn't mention the Vedas. But there's a couple of things important that are missing. And what are those things? That there is a soul, and that there's a spiritual world, and that our goal is to go back to the spiritual world. That's no longer being represented by Buddhism. Buddha didn't actually say these things don't exist. Rather, he was silent on these topics. So Buddhists interpreted his teachings as meaning these things must not exist if Buddha didn't talk about them. So we have, the advent of someone named Shankaracharya, who came, and that was, almost, quite a long time later, and Shankaracharya came, and he taught that, no, let us put the Vedic literatures back into the picture. Now, Buddha took things in one way, but the Jains also have a very similar philosophy to Buddhism, and so many of the principles that are in Buddhism are also shared by the Jain group. There's some definite differences, no doubt about it, but there's a lot of similarities too. So they taught a system also, and this was, I think a little bit later than Buddhism, but around the same time. And now, I think around the change of the millennium, either 900 or the year 1000, somewhere that time, we have Shankaracharya. And Shankaracharya says, no, the Vedas, we should take instruction from them again. So he puts the Vedas back in the picture. And he teaches all over India. He establishes centers in the south and in the west and in the east and in the north. And eventually he convinces the population of India to once again accept Vedic teachings. And what he teaches is essentially Buddhism, but now he's calling it the Vedic teachings. So there's a commonality there, but there's also some differences. And he talks about the Vedic tradition, but he talks about it in a way that is almost identical to Buddhism. So people who were practicing basically Buddhism before don't see it as much different than what they were doing before. And then we have the idea of Buddhism coming into the picture. And then around the 11th or 12th century, we have the Alwars, and they begin to tell that what Shankaracharya had established doesn't give the personal form of the Lord, and that we actually want to develop love for the Supreme Lord. And so finally, we start to get back to the original picture, which was lost at the beginning of Kali Yuga, and it took all that time, practically 1,500 years to come back, maybe closer to 2,000 years to come back on track. But it was actually a plan of the Supreme Lord, and he put all these things there. And each one of these things was a stepping stone back to, again, the original teachings, which are still unknown to many people, but known to a few.
You have so many things over here, very intellectual things. But one thing that struck to my head was when you was talking about Kali Yuga, is it in Kali Yuga like Judeo-Christian belief they have in the end times, Jesus coming up with the Armageddon and then the end of the world doomsday? Is Kali Yuga have something like that too?
There's something remotely similar.
Yeah.
Kali Yuga, for instance, lasts 432,000 years.
Which is we are in now.
Yeah, and we've just started. It was it started 5,000 years ago, so we've got 427,000 years of it left.
Okay.
And it just gets worse, But there's 10,000 years where it gets better. We're in that 10,000 years where it gets better. Then after 10,000 years where Kali Yuga gets better, then it gets worse. It comes in like a flood at that point. Mostly at that point, all religion will be absent from the world. And we can say, why should it be like that? And the reason is that now we have a time for all those people who are really serious about wanting to have nothing to do with God. Now they get the chance for their big party. And so they can all incarnate on the world at that time, and they will. They'll have that kind of karma. It'll be a hellish world, and there'll be a lot of suffering, and it gets worse and worse and worse until finally, at the end of Kali Yuga, Kalki Avatar comes, and there's a great war, which is something like Armageddon. And the world isn't destroyed, but rather religion is once again reestablished, and we get a Satya Yuga. And so this is one thing we call a Divya Yuga. So a Divya Yuga is a collection of all four yugas all together. We have, as we said, Satya Yuga, which is like springtime. We have Treta Yuga, which is like summer. We have Dwapara Yuga, which is like fall, and Kali Yuga, which is like winter. But after a winter, there's always another spring. So all those four seasons together, spring, summer, fall, and winter, are called a seasonal change or a year. So in yogic terms, we call that a Divya Yuga, all four yugas together. And those Divya Yugas recycle again. And those Divya Yugas cycle through 1,000 times, and we come to the end of what's called a day of Brahma, or a Kalpa. And at the end of the day of Brahma, then the universe, in fact, is annihilated to a certain extent. All the living entities their bodies are destroyed, but they sleep in the body of the Supreme until the universe is recreated again. It all happens in a cycle. And when the universe is recreated again in the next day of Brahma, then the living entities come out again, and they continue with their karma.
Okay, the last question, I will finish it up, is my...
I'm doing a little interview here.
This is my personal question for you. It's like two of them or three of them. What is the notion of Hinduism or Iskon Church towards Islam, Christianity, Judaism? And then I also want to know that how come the philosophy of Hinduism only exists in India, but I mean all the previous demigods are found in India, but what happened to other parts of the world? Was there any demigods record found in other parts of the world?
Well, right. If you actually do some historical research. Maybe that's the best term to use. One thing that you'll find is it appears there is a world culture, if we go back far enough. It appears there's a lot of things, for instance, the demigods. That's a good point to start. In ancient India, there's the idea of demigods, Ganesh, Shiva, Brahma, Indra, all these demigods. The Scandinavians have demigods. They have different names for them, Thor, Zeus, so on and so forth. The Chinese have names for demigods. The American Indians have names for demigods. The Egyptians worship demigods. The people in Africa had names for people who controlled the wind and the sun. And so it's interesting that all over the world, even Polynesians, anywhere you want to go, there's this idea that there were powerful beings that somehow controlled natural forces. And so our tradition tells that at one time there was a global world government. And that world government was destroyed at a certain point during the Battle of Kurukshetra. The Battle of Kurukshetra exhausted so many lives, and these were not just any kind of lives, these were all administrators of the world. So all over the world, little pockets became isolated from one another, and they broke down the original knowledge that they once had, and some remembered one part, some remembered another part, some remembered another part, but nobody remembered the whole picture, practically speaking. And then when these cultures met each other after many years of separation because of geological and geographic boundaries, they appeared to be almost diverse cultures. They couldn't see their commonality anymore. And so if we study ancient belief systems, we see there was a lot of interplay between ancient peoples talking to one another about religion and philosophy. And so this idea is that there was at one time this larger picture, and this larger picture then over time broke down. And some people retained one part of it, some people retained another part of it, and some people tried to figure out what the missing pieces were. In some cases they got it wrong. And so we say that there's one supreme. It doesn't matter what you call that supreme. He is the supreme. He may be known by various names in various languages and various religious traditions, but it's the same person. And everyone who sincerely worships that supreme person will certainly get the mercy of that person. But some people want more eagerly to get the very intimate mercy of that supreme, and some are happy with just knowing that supreme in a basic or sort of vague or distant way. And so therefore we have various religious traditions, and any religious tradition can open itself to the person following that religious tradition to come to intimate knowledge of the supreme. But the fact is that most people in most religious traditions don't do that. They're satisfied with living on the outskirts of real spiritual life. They're happy with just being somewhere on the target, not at the center of the target. So we're not against other religions. In fact, we say all religions are teaching basically the same thing. That does not say the same thing as saying all religions are the same. They're certainly not. But there's the same idea that somehow we want to serve and love God. That's the center point. And so different religions have a different system of how to do that. And that's all right. But we should be able to judge by whether a person is genuinely learning how to put God number one in their lives and put other things aside. Then that's the real test. And that's why Prabhupada, our founder, would always stress the idea of Sanatana Dharma, which is not a religious title. It's not a prerogative of one religion. It's not a sect. It's not a religion. It's not a denomination. It's actually the inherent property of the living being to want to worship God. And whatever name you want to call it, it's still Sanatana Dharma. Maybe the other people in another religion don't want to call it that. That's fine. It is nonetheless the same thing, you know. Under the hood, it's the same thing.
When we translate into Sanskrit, it becomes ancient religion. Sanatana means ancient.
Well, Sanatana means eternal, actually, to be.
I mean, some sort of many definitions. So in that sense,
but it means eternal religion, and Dharma actually means not only religion. It equates to the English word duty, and it also equates to the English word inherent property, or we could say defining property. So something cannot be without its defining property. You know, like when we say water is not wet, what are we saying? There's no such thing as water that's not wet, you know. And there's no such thing as sugar that's not sweet. There's no such thing as heat that's not hot. So things have defining properties. And so humans also have a defining property. And one of those important defining properties is they want to serve God. And so they may do it in different names. They may do it under the banner of different traditions. They may have different kind of ancient texts. They may have a different kind of dress or code of behavior, but the end product or the real purpose of it is to learn how to serve God. Okay.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. It has been nice talking to you.
Okay.
And have a nice day.
You too. Nice to meet you.
So that was the enlightenment talk with Swamiji. Have a nice day. Thank you.